Um, yeah, my office gave me a little going away gift, which is really nice. Couple little things. I mean, one of the things that that
And
actually is
folks, we're
really,
live, just letting you know, we're live on Facebook and YouTube.
Oh, hey, everybody.
hey everybody.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Happy April. This is Attorney Robyn McCoy and Attorney Tracey Martin, and this is Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracey. And we have our honored guest, Joseph Novotny, or Joe Novotny. He and I were Congressional Pages back in, gosh, it was like 1991. And so we're so excited to have you with us, Joe. And, you know, we always start off with our mugs. Like I have a mug, an American flag mug, and I've got green tea, matcha green tea, and Robos Red Bush tea. What do you have? Oh, and welcome.
Thank you, Robin. I am so honored to be here. I really appreciate you having me. So this is my 116th Congress mug, and I have a it's some herbal tea that I found that's actually really good, and it's just got some honey and lemon in it. It's good.
Okay, I have honey and lemon too. Tracey?
That's nice, Joe. Was that a gift that you got, or did you purchase that on your own?
I purchased this, and it was like $2 in the house gift shop.
Oh,
Wow.
I know, it was quite the bargain.
You
go
got
there.
the employee discount, right?
No employee discounts, but the thing that's great, and unfortunately now I can't go there anymore, but they just have some really neat items at the
I'm gonna have
gift
to
shop.
check it out.
So
Now,
yeah.
I brought my 118th congressional mug, and it's got all the names of all the senators and their room numbers, office numbers, and their phone numbers. And
Wow.
I got this from Redbubble, and I thought it was so cool, but it's not as cool as your mug, Joe. And inside peach tea.
Peach
Cheers to
tea.
you. And
Yes.
congratulations
Yeah,
on your
cheers.
retirement yesterday.
Cheers. Thank
Yeah,
you.
congratulations. So, okay, so for the audience, I'm gonna read, Joe, your bio, although you know I do know you, but yeah, we're gonna go for the audience so they can know. So Joe has spent his entire career working in Congress and has served the House of Representatives for nearly 30 years. He's an experienced and skilled public speaker who has used his time on Capitol Hill to create trusted relationships, becoming an invaluable legislative and institutional resource, and he has developed a keen sense of political strategy and process. In 2010, Speaker Nancy Pelosi appointed Joe as House Reading Clerk. Joe's responsibility is to convey the dignity of the House, has made him a well-known face on C-SPAN, and he has taken his role in representing the institution with great care and pride. With such a visible role, Joe has worked closely with leadership and committee staff of both parties during his time on the House floor. Joe has had extensive experience in learning about the House and committee process, and his duties included communicating with the Senate regarding delivery of legislation and messages. Joe has also helped to put together annual appropriations and defense authorization bills when they come to the House floor, in addition to other significant pieces of legislation. Prior to his appointment as a reading clerk, Joe was chief clerk for Congressman George Miller out of California at the Education Workforce Committee. Some of the important legislation that Joe worked on included the Affordable Care Act, No Child Left Behind, the Little Let Better Fair Pay Act, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and he has worked on other issues such as mine safety, protecting pensions for airline workers, and child bullying. Before his time at the Education and Labor Committee, Joe worked for Congressman Miller at the National Resources Committee, and he spent time on issues relating to Puerto Rico, the Northern Mariana Islands, and pardoning servicemen from Port Chicago disaster of 1944. Joe is originally from Chicago, first came to DC as a page. So shout out to all the House pages. We'll shout out the Senate pages too. Shout out to all the pages out there. And
Yes,
then as a staffer for House and Waves Committee, Means Committee Chairman Dan Restkonkowski. During his time on Capitol Hill, Joe became a Stennis Fellow during the 115th Congress. And he used the experience to communicate with senior House and Senate staff to strategize about ways to improve Congress, create an open dialogue from staff as well as members, and how to help retain institutional knowledge at a time when Congress was rapidly changing. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in political communication from George Washington University and resides in DC. So Yeah, so we're excited. I had the pleasure with other pages of being there with your retirement shindig, which was virtual. Hopefully we'll get together soon, when the plague is beyond us, so we can hug and, do our normal stuff. But Joe, welcome here with us today. And yeah, I definitely, I'm talking with Tracey. I said, oh, well, no, we need to talk to Joe because he was right there on January 6th and he's just had a wealth of experience from being a page to the present. So why don't we start with talking to the audience, like, what motivated you to come to DC in the first place?
So it's really funny because so yesterday was my very, very last day ever on Capitol Hill. I had retired on March 4th, but then I came back and I was under contract to help train my replacement.
Okay.
My friend Tylese, who's fabulous, and she's taking over for me. I've known Tylese for 18 years.
Is that Tylese Ali?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Tylese is going to be fantastic in the role of reading clerk moving forward, and I'm really excited and happy for her. Another historic appointment, first African-American reading clerk in the House of Representatives.
That's
Very
awesome.
nice.
Yeah.
Yes, congratulations to you both. That's great.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So, but what brought me to DC, actually, I had no real intention of ever coming to DC. It wasn't something that was ever on my radar. And when I was in high school, and Robyn, you'll appreciate this because our friend Hector, we were in the same homeroom, and all of a sudden one day we got called down to the cafeteria from the social studies chairman of our high school, and basically he said, Congressman Rostenkowski sponsors 2 kids every year to be a page in Washington, D.C. And we were like, well, what's a page? And so we were given the tutorial about what a page was and what our jobs and responsibilities would be.
Right.
And we applied and got in. And so that was the beginning of what ended up being almost 30 years on Capitol Hill.
I had to get the tutorial too. I was there, and my dad was getting sworn in to handle cases before the Supreme Court. And Congressman Hertel from Michigan was talking about, he was just giving us a tour, and my dad nudges him. He's like, ask him about the page program. And I was shy. I think I was like 14 or 15. And I'm like, what? I'm not asking that. And my dad raised his hand. My daughter has a question. So then I asked about it. And then, I ended up doing it. And they, at first I was like, I'm just doing the summer schedule. I am not going, they're not going to mess with my school schedule. And they looked at my grades. They're like, no, you have really good grades. You should go. There's a page school. You can do this. And so I went and I loved it. I only did the 6 months. I wish I would have, after doing it, Judy Sung, who's out there, she did it for a year. I would have done it longer if I'd have known how amazing it was.
And we would have loved it if you had stayed, Robyn, because I remember you were only there first semester. So.
Right.
And so, Joe, you just kept returning year after year, even through college, because you just said that you earned your Bachelor of Arts in Communications. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah, it was very funny because one of the things that I did was I kept in touch with Mr. Rostenkowski's office. I had worked when we were pages, we would also sort of help out a little bit and do almost like intern work in the office whenever they would need a little help and answer some phones and things. And so when I came back out here for school at George Washington University, I ended up basically just saying, hey, do you have any space for an intern? And they said, absolutely. And so that started my second week of college. I started basically just working not full time, but, on the Hill, probably about 25 hours a week.
Mm.
And so it was a lot of time. So being in school full time, but working on the Hill for a good amount of time every week. And I did that through all 4 years of college.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, you have been described as the voice of Congress. And, you're on today as part of our Political Jobs Days in DC special. Did you ever have any idea that you would become a C-SPAN rock star? Because I understand people recognize you from C-SPAN. I love C-SPAN myself, but people recognize you in public.
Yeah.
They do sometimes, but with the mask actually has sort of, I think that sort of has calmed things down. It was really
Okay.
funny because for a while people would recognize me, and then something happened. People stopped coming up to me, but then they would tell me like months or weeks later, I thought I saw you at blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, why didn't you come over and say anything? I think they were, I don't know if they were intimidated, but there's this term DC famous, which of course I just do not buy into any of that stuff. But
DC
people
famous.
repeatedly said, you're DC famous, you're DC famous. And I think
Yeah.
that there is that weird allure to it. But no, I never ever intended to move into this area. It was again pretty much by accident. Now, Robyn, I'm sure you remember, like when we were pages, we were kind of in awe of the reading clerks. We thought that they were really fantastic. There was
Yeah,
that.
Mr. Anderson. Yeah.
So yeah, so Mr. Anderson was the clerk, and then Paul Hayes and Meg Getz, they were the two reading clerks. But I remember just all of us were like, wow, that's so cool.
Right.
But it never occurred to me, and it was never on my radar that
Did you
I
say
would be
Matt Getz?
Meg
Oh,
Getz.
Meg Getz. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I listened to the interview that you did with on WGN,
Yeah.
and of course I researched you. And one thing that I found very interesting is, well, there's so many interesting things about you, Joe, frankly, but you refer to yourself as an institutionalist. And in contrast, I read somewhere where you said that you actually primed yourself for your daily duties by listening to punk rock music. And you ran down, you ticked off some of your favorite bands.
Yeah.
Minor Threat was one of them.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, okay, he loves Minor Threat. And then he encountered a threat at the Capitol on January 6th. But it wasn't a minor threat, it was a major threat. I really want to
Major.
find
Oh my
out
gosh.
what, I mean, you were there at the Capitol on January 6th when this insurrection went down?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was it's so interesting because, now more than 3 months have passed, and we've had some time to reflect and absorb a little bit. I think for a lot of us, it still is incredibly fresh, and we're still trying to figure out what happened, how do we feel about it, and how do we process it and move forward. It was incredibly personal, and the thing about this is that people have this idea that Capitol Hill is. I think they sometimes think that the Capitol Hill it's a place that is so massive and so big, and there are aspects of it that are, but the longer you've been there, the more of a community it feels. And for all of us, for law enforcement, for staff people, for members of Congress, it just felt so, well, the chaplain said it, I think, very well. She called it a moral betrayal.
Wow.
And I think, and that really stood out for me because we all do our jobs and we all love that place so much. I think most of us do. I think a lot of people don't get it, but that's not because they haven't tried. Maybe they just haven't been there long enough and they haven't had the experiences that bind them to each other as people, but also to the institution, the building, to Congress, to the process. But yeah, it was, I think, and I'm happy to talk about how it's sort of evolved throughout the course, but it
I
was
mean, can you
still
talk about
shocking.
you're not under any type of restriction, and how's your mental health? I mean, you went through something really awful. I mean, do you feel
Yeah,
comfortable talking to us about it?
Right,
sure,
because I
absolutely.
know that Dan Kildee, I mean, the congressman, he was talking about how he was getting counseling, and we, for our Black women lawyers meeting, we did have some of the members of Congress come in, Dingle,
Yeah,
Rashida Tlaib, and Brenda Lawrence, and Haley Stevens, and I'm like, I can only imagine. I mean, having, we as pages, we talked about it, being there in DC, how it was a really exciting process, but we could only imagine being there in the midst of what is a domestic terrorist
yeah.
event.
It's funny you mentioned four people that I've talked to, and that I feel a certain connection with. And it's so funny. All four of them they're good people. They're really great
Right.
people. Rashida is an incredible human being. She's very sensitive. And Dan Kildee, his uncle was Dale Kildee, and when we were pages,
I know, I remember.
he was the first member of Congress that ever learned my name. Dan was the last person that I talked to when I walked off the floor for the last time.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's a full circle moment with some of these people, and that's one of the things I want people to I hope they understand and appreciate the history that is there and our connections to them and how we assimilate to each other. And that's on both sides of the aisle, because truly I feel that way about other members of Congress. But going back to the sixth, I think what's important to sort of understand is that we've had a lot of times where we knew going into a situation that there would be a heightened state of security, and we always felt confident that the police were going to protect us. And so the thing that was though is that the day before the 6th or the 5th, we knew that the National Guard had been requested. When I showed up at the Capitol, I didn't see any uptick in presence, security presence that was more than usual. And I thought, that's really odd. And, throughout the course of the day, even though when you're inside and you're busy and there are things that are happening, you're not always paying attention. But Twitter sort of had become our friend, and that when you follow things, whether it's legislation or things that are happening, it's always Twitter always has the information before you even find out yourself.
Go to
Or it's
social
happening
media.
in real time. You hear something and then a minute later it'll be on Twitter.
Right.
But anyway, it was the counting of the electoral ballots. There was the first objection. So I think it was Paul Gosar from Arizona raised the first objection for the state of Arizona. So we broke from our joint session and we entered into debate on the floor. And it was just it was a very odd thing, because when I try to describe, sometimes time is really funny. It's not linear. It's almost like an arc. And the time and perception of time that day got really distorted. And that time during debates, it just became really foggy, because we knew that there were protesters outside, and we knew that things were getting really, really heated.
Okay.
But then there came a moment where we knew that there had been a breach, and that was pretty frightening.
How did you know there was a breach though? What did you hear something?
Through Twitter.
Was there an alert?
Through Twitter. I found out through Twitter because, and through people texting me. People were texting me saying things are getting really bad outside. We're on the House floor, so we're in the middle of debate, and so we're paying attention to what's going on. But unfortunately, things happened so quickly that I just don't feel like the police were really adequately able to react. The other issue too is so many of them were outside.
Okay.
I feel like when there weren't enough people inside, because so many of them were outside. Once that breach happened, that was part of the issue. Now, I don't know for a fact that there weren't enough people, but it's just the perception. I just know that once they were in the building, they were overwhelmed. I mean, there was just no question about that. But what happened is we were in the House chamber, and we had to recess because at a certain point, Speaker Pelosi is presiding.
Okay.
And they took her very quickly. They took Steny Hoyer and I think Mr. McCarthy. So all the leadership staff are taken out.
Okay.
Jim McGovern, who's the Rules Committee chair, he's put in the chair to preside. And so, we're like, okay, and the thing that really is sort of the one of the things I remember is you hear the doors locking in the back of the chamber. And we've done this. We've done
drills
exercises and rehearses for evacuation, for sheltering in place, escape hoods. But when you shelter in place, what happens is you hear those doors locking. And when you hear that, you're like, oh, we're in lockdown. And that's happened before. But but in this particular instance, it was not a good feeling. Then one of the police sergeants came, and we had to recess and announce that they were in the rotunda, that they were coming our way, that tear gas had been used. We had to get out our escape hoods, and then
Are they
things
under the chair or in your desk, or where did you?
all over the chamber. Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
yeah, but
And did you put it on right away?
we just had them ready to go. They just told us just to be prepared in case, for whatever reason, because they're when you left the chamber, you could smell it in the air. It was, and if you were in a particular area, then it would be more concentrated. But in that time, it just devolved very, very quickly, because you heard banging on the doors. Like, there are wooden doors on the outside of the chamber, and you could hear them banging on those.
Okay. And when you say smell it, what are you smelling? Gas, or what are you smelling?
Well, I mean, it was just that the remnants, I guess. And that wasn't until later. It wasn't in the chamber. You didn't smell that
Okay.
at all in the chamber. It wasn't until we evacuated that you can tell that there was something had been sprayed. It just wasn't strong enough that you could discern what it was.
Okay.
But Robyn, you'll appreciate this. Like, there were those benches that we would sit on in the chamber, when we were
Right.
pages, and that by the page desks. And so they were grabbing these huge pieces of furniture and starting to pile them up against the doors.
Oh, okay.
The house chaplain started to pray. It was really like, it felt, it's like that scene in Titanic when the ship is going down and then the priest is praying, and it's like
Right.
you just are like, what is going on here? This is crazy. And so it got, you heard the people outside the chamber, and we just knew. I mean, we knew that this was not going to end well, and we needed to get out of there. And fortunately, I think they were able to draw the protesters off to one side, and then we evacuated out the other side.
Okay.
I was probably one of the first, like, 30 or 40 people out of the chamber, because the door was on my side of the rostrum. And so we had to go down a flight of steps, keep walking, and then we evacuated to one of the House office buildings.
Okay.
And
So
how
and
long
you
did you
say,
stay in
so
there?
because there were some people that said that they were in a room, like a kind of holding pattern for a period of time. Did you ever have to do that while you were waiting, or?
Yeah, that's right. I was with, like, one of the first groups of people, and I think it was before it was happening so quickly. I think they were trying to figure out what was a good designated safe area that was large enough to hold everybody. Of course, you're in a pandemic, so you have to consider, it's got to be as large an area as possible to accommodate people, that it can be secured and safe.
And were you in one of the rooms? There was a room where I saw there was a congresswoman that was passing out masks, because I know Congresswoman Dingell was upset because she said people weren't wearing masks. There were people who were.
That was where we ended up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I
And how
was
long were you there, Joe? How long were you in that holding
6
pattern?
hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So that would have been, I want to say, like, around one, we probably ended up there. Yeah, I was almost close to 2 o'clock, I think. And then I want to say that we left around 8, or a little after 8. So it was roughly 6 hours.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
So,
remember being at home watching it. And I mean, I think a lot of people that follow politics in the news, we knew something was going to happen. I thought it was going to be the inauguration was going to be when pandemonium broke loose. I didn't know. I had no idea. I was just shocked when I saw that it was the Capitol.
I mean, none of us thought that it would ever get to that point. And what was really interesting was sort of seeing everybody processing it. And so there was definitely shock for most of us, but there were a lot of people too that you could immediately sense the anger. They were
Really?
really angry. Oh yeah. I mean, there were members that normally wouldn't, use expletives, that were just, you could just sense that they were very upset and angry that
And
we
who
were
were
in
they
this.
angry at or angry with?
I think
Did
they were
they?
angry at the situation. I think that they were upset that there had been such a breakdown and a breach. But I don't think at that point we could really understand and appreciate. I mean, the thing too is, like, all of the images of that I saw after everything. I saw them the next day. I was not aware, you know, like just in terms of like, like the background, like I didn't know that was happening. None of that was
Yeah.
on my radar until after the fact. And
And how did that impact you when you saw those images and,
shock,
knowing that you were inside? I
shock.
mean,
Well,
wow.
and one of the things, like my poor family, they were, I'm glad at least from the get-go, before anything even happened, I was texting my sister saying, things are gonna get really crazy here. I'm gonna keep messaging you that I'm okay.
Right,
Just know that I'm okay. And so I'm glad I had the foresight to at least do that,
right.
because I cannot fathom like what was going through my family's mind. I really, like, after the fact, I thought, oh my God, I feel so badly for them, because now this is no longer just about what I went through. It was also about what they were going through
Right. I'm
as
sure
it
they were
happened.
terrified. And then for you to regroup and then go back to work. I mean, how did you do that? How did you get yourself together, mentally and physically to do that? Duty
One of the
called.
one of the most powerful moments in that happened in lockdown was, because Speaker Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, they were taken away.
Okay.
Like around 6 o'clock or so, they showed up. So they walk into the room and we're like, oh, it was almost like that feeling of, oh, thank God mom and dad are home.
Okay.
Like all
Right.
of a sudden we were like, they would not be here if it wasn't safe.
Okay.
And so, it was hard because Speaker Pelosi was completely in shock, as was Mr. Hoyer. The two of them normally are pretty calm, cool, collected, and they're not, they don't you don't really see what's going on with them, but they were absolutely shocked. And because there's no cameras, nobody's recording it. So it was just a very, very honest, open moment. And she comes in and she says, what happened today was unacceptable. We have a duty to the world. We have to go back. They're securing the chamber. It's getting cleaned. We're making sure everything is going to be safe. We're going back to work. We're doing this tonight.
Right.
And it's sort of like I've been telling people, what is so fascinating about that is like she's kind of like your mom, who's like, you're going to eat your vegetables, you're doing your homework, and then you're going to go to bed. She's very like
We're gonna
direct.
do
there's,
this.
there's a purpose, and we have a purpose, and that's what's going to happen. By comparison, Mr. Hoyer was like the concerned dad, because he's like telling the staff, we can't do this without you. We need you. We're so grateful for you. And then between the two of them, we were like, we are doing this. We have to do this. And they were great. I mean, it was emotional. It didn't feel at that moment that it was the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader. Like, it felt like we were, people. And that was like one of the most human moments of that whole day. I'll never forget that. It was incredible.
So
Right.
Speaker Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, they had sort of calming effect on everybody, and that enabled you to regroup and go back to work.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
That
Yeah.
is. I think, I mean, I know Congresswoman Dingell had talked to us a little bit about that too. She was just like that the speaker was like, we're gonna keep doing our job. The people brought us here to do a job. We're gonna do our job. We've been shaken, but we're gonna keep moving. And so I think that's definitely and Steny Hoyer too, awesome signs of leadership. And gosh, as I told you this before, as you're telling us this and you told us pages about this is a memoir, Joe. I see you writing this as a memoir, and then you're gonna I don't know when we can go out again. Your people are coming to the bookstore and they're gonna sit and listen to your excerpts from the book, and they're gonna be like Tracey and I, like sitting here like kids, like listening, like, oh my gosh, like this is intense,
Yeah, we got to get the autographed copies, Joe. Really, seriously,
Absolutely.
it's book material. But you said you felt moral betrayal. I mean, can you tell us, who did you feel that toward? The situation, or?
The situation, because I think for those of us that are so connected to government, it's I think one of the maybe, I don't know if it's a misperception, but one of the things that I'm always a little concerned about is people just have a very hard time trusting the government, and people have a disconnection from who serves. And I think part of the problem is that they've lost the human connection to it. Whenever people would be able to come to the Hill before the pandemic, I would try to give them tours of the House floor, and giving them that accessibility gives it a human component. And I think that when you meet people who serve, whether it's members of Congress or whether it is staff people or law enforcement or any of the people, the custodians and superintendent people, all of us have a job to do, but we also do it because we believe in the country. We love our country. And we
Right.
know that regardless of where we stand with issues, we show up and we do it with pride and purpose. What is sad is that there are so many of those people that I believe that showed up that day. And maybe, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand because, and I guess maybe this is the struggle I've had is trying to understand what would motivate somebody to do that. But I wish that they would have been able to get a Capitol tour back when you could do tours, to assimilate, to understand that this is a sacred place. This is a place where the best work of the country can come together. It doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't always look that way, but there are so many necessary and purposeful things that still happen. And those of us that are part of the process do it because we love the country. And so the betrayal came from that sense of, don't you understand? Like, we're all Americans. We're trying to do this together. This is not easy. This, especially coming out of a pandemic, which has been so hard for so many people. And I believe that the pandemic has had a really harsh impact on members of Congress because it's keeping them from getting to know each other. We're spending so much time apart. We're not having the ability to stay connected. And that part, I think, has had an incredibly negative impact. And it's sad because I just think that, and one of the things I said on WGN is that there are 435 members of Congress. Not everybody hates each other. There are a lot of really amazing friendships that you just don't see because it's not on social media and you just don't see it on TV.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I remember even as a page seeing that you would see, Republicans, Democrats coming together. You would see some of us that would treat us as pages, treat us well. Some of us, I don't know, act like we didn't exist, but but it was, yeah, it was nice. I loved, my parents had to kind of push me out the door to go to DC, but I went, and then I didn't want to come back home because you come back home, you're in DC and you see all this amazing work going on and you're a part of it. And you're like, then you come back home and it's like, everything is kind of mundane. It's like, oh, really? Really? It's like, this is it. This is not like it was. But why don't you tell the audience too, like you were talking about the next day, what was the experience like the next day coming back after the 6th and you're coming back on the 7th after all that had happened?
So the way that it was working is because of social distancing and everything. Like, the House was not in session the next day, but I did come back because I was getting my vaccine shot and so coming back was very odd. It was just that was strange. Then I was working the following week because that day was basically right before a break. Like,
Okay.
we met the whole week and then we took a break and then had a little like a district work period. But coming back, that was hard. There were a few members that were there that day. And so we do what are called pro forma sessions, which means, what that means is that the House and Senate are required to meet every 3 days because that's required by the Constitution. And we don't have adjournment resolutions, which means that we can leave for more extended periods. That just hasn't happened in a long time. So, but there were a few members, people that I love and respect and admire, and we had a cry. We just sat on the floor, and I mean, I cried mostly, but they did too.
And
We
was
all got
that cathartic
emotional.
for you?
Um, it- yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was important. And, you know, there were just so many images from the 6th, and the one that really affected me, and you can see it still does, was Eugene Goodman.
Oh,
That
yes.
raised soul.
Wow. Did you know
Yeah.
him? You had interactions with him before all of this
Yeah.
insurrection stuff? Okay.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about Officer
Because
Sicknick and then the one that just recently was
yeah.
killed? Did you know them or see them
I,
or?
I didn't know Officer Sicknick, but the one who recently died in the attack, you know, we'd see each other around and say hello in the hallway and things like that. I mean, so again, going back to the sense of community, when something like that happens, it feels so incredibly personal because you have attachments. You can recognize people and you know who they are. And you know, Officer Goodman's just a wonderful guy. And you know, you go and run into each other at the ballpark sometimes, you know, and things like that. You know, that's the kind of thing that is fantastic about the Hill, is that you still have those moments, at least prior to the pandemic, that you would run into people here and there. And it was just, yeah, it was so powerful. It was such a powerful image. And to think that, you know, this is somebody that I've talked to before and communicated with, and
Wow.
it just blows your mind.
And
So,
were
and
you
that was
there?
hard.
Were you there? The other officer that was killed like recently was William Evans. And were you at the Capitol when that happened as well? Or were you at home or?
No, I was visiting my family for Easter, so I was watching that unfold on TV. And the thing that was hard about that is that I was at the Capitol the week before that.
Okay.
I was there the day when they started taking the fencing down, and the police officers were really upset. A lot of the, I mean, staff were as well. But one of the things that I felt really bad about is the fact that the police officers, you could just feel that they were upset. They felt like, why are people not protecting us? We wish that there was still something in place so that we could feel that they took the events of the 6th seriously, you know. And you know, but the thing is that there has to be a solution. That fencing was just it was a quick fix to something. And I think that, you know, there has to still be that sense, though, that you don't want to let that happen again. Something has to happen. We just don't know what that is. So
Right. And when you talk
Joe,
about
I
the
agree with
relationship,
you.
oh, I was going to say, when you talk about the relationship with the officers, I think about Tracey and I. We both work at the criminal courts, the juvenile courts. We have deputy sheriffs that are there that are looking out for security. And I mean, we had an incident where there's a deputy sheriff that was killed. And I know everybody was upset because it's like a family. It's like, you know, there's the prosecutor, the judge, the defense attorney, the client, the victims, and the deputies that protect us. And, you know, obviously we have our roles, our mission, and the other side has their mission, but we're all kind of like a family. And so when one of us gets hurt or sick, or even with the COVID, it saddens everybody, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Joe, I was going to say that I totally agree with you that there's got to be a solution if there's a desire for a solution. I found it interesting that you said that, you had heard the National Guard was coming. You had heard that the day before that the National Guard was
yeah,
coming. But one of the big questions that a lot of people were wondering was, why did it take so long for the Guard to deploy?
yeah.
And there's so much coming out now about the events of January 6th are all in the news. But I want to pivot back to your career, though, because again, on WGN, I think you use this phrase that your role as a House reader it required you to make sure that everything is, quote, letter perfect.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, how did you make sure that everything was letter perfect? I mean, did you use technology? What did you do to ensure that?
So actually, it's really funny because everything that we do is still on paper. So
Wow.
So, technology is extremely helpful. And there are the moments when that does come in, we do use technology, but basically the thing is like on the House floor, when amendments come up for consideration, you have to make sure that all of the amendments are drafted correctly and that everything looks right and correct. And so if there's a discrepancy, or if something looks off, if there's a misspelling or a punctuation, and really that's what I mean is that when you're dealing with legislation, you want everything to look as exact as possible, so that when the bill actually leaves the floor, that it's passed correct, but also too that the people who have to put the bill together, they're called enrolling clerks, proofreaders, and then they have they're the ones actually inserting everything, printing it off, proofreading it, and then it goes to the Senate. And so they have an extremely important and detail-oriented job too.
So
What about the
do you
CARES
still
Act?
have those congressional records? Like, I know I have some around here. I have to look in storage, but those
Yeah.
congressional records from when we were pages, do you guys still have those when you say everything's still in writing?
Yeah, absolutely. The record is still, and the record is really useful for staff people because it is it's everything that we do. It is every time a report is filed on the House floor, every statement that members make. Under the office of the clerk, you have all these people with different roles, but you have the official reporters, and what they do is they, if a member makes a statement on the House floor, and let's say they mention someone's name, it's the official reporter's responsibility to get the piece of paper to compare the spelling, so that the stenographer who's typing away on the floor, that they make sure that that spelling is correct, so everything looks the right way. It's amazing how the process works, and to this day there are still so many things that have not changed because it's in place, because it works. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how it's been for so many years.
But we were in
decades.
place as the House pages, and we work too. So I mean, I'm definitely a part of that committee to bring back the House pages. I mean, I know they have the Senate pages. It shouldn't, I definitely think we need to, because it's a really good program for young people, get exposure. And look at you've gone all the way, made this as a career. And Tracey, you were saying something. I know you were asking a question earlier.
Well, I was just wondering what happened with a House page program. It was discontinued. Why was it discontinued if the Senate page program
No,
is
I'll
still
let you
going?
go. You can.
Sure. I mean, that's a really great question. And unfortunately, the program ended in 2010, and it got to a point where there had been another scandal, like I think in 2009, and the oversight became hard. And I think that there just got to be a point where they didn't know how to take the politics out of it. It ended up being really a politically motivated thing,
I see.
where one side felt that maybe it just wasn't being given the attention that it deserved, and things started to just fall apart. And unfortunately, they just said, instead of trying to fix those issues, they just said, we'll just get rid of the program because technology has eliminated the need for it, which is not true, because in the Senate they still have the program and it's run a certain way that I think they have the right accountability. And right now it's been put on hold because of the pandemic. But I'll tell you, most of the Senate staff that work on the Senate floor, they were pages.
Wow. Interesting.
It opens up that door of seeing what public service is, and people fall in love. It's just one of those things. Your knowledge of process begins at that point, and then you just want to. It's not that people don't leave and go try other things. It's just that they come back to it because they feel a connection and a passion, and they want to do good things.
Right.
So
Well, what about you, Joe? What's next? Are you going to run for office? Are you going to write a book, travel? You're a young
College
man. What's the
professor,
next step?
law school. I'm putting out shout out for law school because a lot of us are lawyers. A lot of us pages are lawyers. Shout out for lawyer, but college professor, like, yeah. What's next?
So Tracey, to answer your question, I just took a trip. It was my first big trip post-pandemic. Took a little bit of time off, and it was incredible. It was, and to further answer your question from before about, how I feel mentally after the 6th, I went to California and I took a trip to Big Sur.
Oh,
I went
nice.
hiking, and I spent just time.
Hello, you guys. It's
Which you'll hear about soon. So
Oh,
I'm
nice. Well, you have
excited.
to come
Yes.
back on the show and, give us a little breaking news there.
the screen freezed a little bit. I heard about the Big Sur, but what did you say after that?
Oh, I was just saying that there's an opportunity that I'm exploring that you'll hear about soon.
Oh, excited about that.
Exciting.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
also, I mean, again, for you being being the first openly gay house reading clerk, how I want to talk to the audience about that, or whatever you're comfortable with sharing. But
Sure.
what was that like? Were you welcome? Did you have people whispering and haters, or what was that like?
I never encountered a single unkind or anything. Not to not to my knowledge, at least. So,
Okay.
it was that was an incredibly important thing, because I always just wanted to be open and be myself. At
Right.
the end of the day, what really mattered was the work. So I would always put my attention and focus on the work and on the dignity of the institution, and just making sure that the institution was represented well. But what I didn't understand and appreciate was that I really became a role model for gay staff. I didn't know, because part of the other thing too, you're so busy working, you don't really get to interact. You don't go to the social gatherings and happy hours. And so it's not really on your mind. You don't think about it. And then all of a sudden, speaking to the gay, lesbian, transgender staff association, and just the feedback that you're getting and the amount of love, it really blew my mind how warmly they felt about me, and being able to see somebody up there. That's another reason, though, why I'm so proud of Tylese.
Okay.
And she deserves that opportunity. That's one of the things that I do love about Speaker Pelosi, is she's about being inclusive and showing diversity and wanting everybody to have an opportunity, and everybody deserves that chance. And so that's one of the things I'm really grateful for. I did it for 11 years. It was an incredible experience. I'm so happy, though, that I can now hand it off to somebody that I know is going to do an incredible job. So
That's great. I want to take a moment um, to share with the audience what Speaker Pelosi said yesterday. She announced in a press release in connection with your retirement, Joe, as House Reading Clerk. And she said, quote, "In 2010, it was my great and proud honor as Speaker of the House to name Joe Novotny, Reading Clerk, the first openly gay man to hold this position. I'm proud of that. His historic service has made our Congress more inclusive, more diverse, and representative of the people we serve. His historic service has made our Congress, again, one that he has served as a child of immigrants." I didn't know that. Novotny's ascendance in the halls of the U.S. Capitol is, as he has proudly said, the story of the American dream. And she said a lot more, but I just wanted to share that nugget. I didn't know that you're a child of immigrants too.
yeah, that was, I think, one of the things that I was always sort of in awe of, just because my parents came to this country. My father was born in the Czech Republic. He escaped communism.
Okay.
Wow.
And so, and my mother is, Italian. And so we have this interesting background, but we never had a connection to politics. Politics was something that we were interested in, and my parents were both really informed and they cared about it, and it was something that was discussed. But I feel as though it wasn't like I was being pushed in that direction. It was definitely not something that I felt like we had a natural in with, And so that was why I love the Page program, though, is that it gave me that experience. I would have never have come to Washington had it not been for that. I would have never have been attainable to me, or never seemed attainable. And it's
Right.
not something that I would have ever considered.
Yeah,
But
no, me too. I definitely agree. And I did share the remarks from Speaker Pelosi on my personal page, but for the audience, we'll definitely share that on our political coffee, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that. Because yeah, you're amazing, Joe. I mean, I just think it's so, I work with young people, and, just to hear your story, it's definitely, this is inspirational for young people, for gay folks, straight folk, whatever, folks out there that are like, you're just living this positive experience and still coming away from this traumatic situation, and you still have a positive outlook. Because I know some people be like, look, oh my gosh, I'm not going out anywhere. And that brings me to my next question, because they just reported in the news, they were saying that after January 6th, that there are members of Congress that have invested in their own personal security. And can you speak to that? And then did you think about doing some things as well, as far as just making sure everything was okay? Or
I mean, I think that what was really strange about the night of the 6th is that the city went into lockdown, and I remember leaving the Capitol at like 1 a.m, or whenever it was that I left, and I mean, there was not a soul on the street, and I just remember thinking, my gosh, this is so weird and jarring that like there's all of this stuff that happened, all of this violence, and now there's like nobody. Um, and over time, I just sort of began to feel like it wasn't that things were normal, but you definitely felt that there was more security around. I do think with members that a lot of them had some death threats. There were a lot of concerns. I know that some staff people had some threats as well. Everybody had to take it seriously, because it was just such an unfortunate thing that people could no longer feel safe. They couldn't leave and go home and late at night. And there were people that I know, just they became really more aware, but also afraid of what was around them. And that was staff people, that was members of Congress. For me, it was I don't know if anything necessarily changed, which is really funny, because I think I also knew in my mind that for as much as I loved working on the Hill, I was also ready to leave. And I was ready to leave a while ago. It wasn't the 6th that really did that. It was a bit of a catalyst. And it just sort of makes you think a little bit too about, the balance of life, what you give up. And these jobs are really demanding and stressful, and it does take a toll on you, and you have to look after yourself. Like you have to take care of yourself. The other thing too is we have to look after each other, and that's one of the
Right.
things that keeps stressing to people is
right.
check in with people, shoot them a text, or when you see them, if you run into them, really ask them how they're doing, because I think that's how we get through not just the 6th, but there's also the complication of COVID. We've been
Right.
isolated. We've been spending so much time by ourselves. We haven't really had the opportunity to reconnect in person. And so when you put those two things together, it is really like a big challenge. And though I worry about the staff and the members and the institution, just having been there the last 2 days, something felt different but better. People seem to have a little, like, the energy came down.
Okay.
It's a little
Okay.
more calm. People just seemed a little bit more like they could breathe. I don't know. It was the weirdest. It's hard to articulate, because that place is so I mean, unless you're around it all the time, it's hard to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But you sensed it, so it must have been so. Wow. When we were chatting before the broadcast, and I'm very curious. You got a beautiful background. I disagree with you. I think a room rater would give you a #1 remarks or
Right.
rating. Who signed that? You said that's an autographed photograph or something
Yeah,
behind you?
it's a poster. So one of my favorite bands is they're a band called Luna. They're from New York,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's actually the main songwriter. He's actually from New Zealand, but they're one of my favorite bands, and it was signed by all of them. And I just
Cool.
thought the print was really pretty.
Yeah,
And
no, it's beautiful. And your background has you in
yeah,
there.
I think it's
Great.
cool.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. So, yeah, this has been great having you here, Joe. And I don't know what's going on with our reunion. I don't know if it's going to be virtual or in person. I guess we're just waiting to see what happens.
So I'm guessing we'll think about maybe, because technically I guess it's next year, because everybody, the way I look at it, we both of our classes, we had our departure ceremonies in 92. So I'm guessing we have another year.
Right.
I think
Do
by
you
that
have
point,
your reunions every year or how does it work? How often?
we've been doing
10,
them.
15, 20. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, big chunks of time.
we
Okay.
were our class was very active. People keep up with each other. You know, you're in somebody's town, you try to connect, you know, hey, I'm in town type thing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been fantastic. I've had so many questions for Joe and we've run out of time. Wanted to ask him questions like, what was the most difficult name or word to pronounce, during his career. And we were chatting about, this particular member of Congress who was in the media yesterday with the Anglo-Saxon ideas that they're pushing, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I hope that you can come back and visit with
I
us,
would love
Joe,
to.
because this was just fascinating. We want to find out about your next moves, and
Yeah,
it
we want
sounds
to
very
update.
exciting.
My most hated word that I had to pronounce was prospectuses.
Oh, wow.
Practices.
That is a tough
I don't know why I got it right that time, but there's so many times I didn't, and I just hated that word.
Okay.
That's a tongue twister for sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Wow.
But
All
I
right.
appreciate you having me so much. This is really great. This is a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
it would be better if it was in person, but hey, we're doing the best we can. So we give you a virtual hug, and yeah, looking forward to the next get together, and stay safe, Joe. And so folks, this has been Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracey and our honored guest, Mr. Joseph Novotny, who is a former House Reading Clerk and former Congressional Page. So I hope you get a chance
Robyn,
to enjoy
thank
the
you.
weather.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. This was just so awesome, and I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody else will have as much fun as I did doing this. So thank
Oh,
you.
great. Thanks, Joe. You take care of yourself.
You
Yeah,
as
take care
well.
of yourself.
Stay
Maybe we'll see
safe.
you in
Thanks
DC.
for your service.
Yes, please. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Awesome.
Be blessed.
Take care. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.